Hello, I'm Patricia Carvelis at the Brisbane Powerhouse. We're on Yagara and Turrbal country. Remember, you can live stream us around the country on iView and all the socials. Q&A is the hashtag to get us started tonight. Let's hear from Daniel Williams. Hi, Daniel.
Hi there. Thanks for having me. My name is Daniel. I'm a descendant of the Gureng people of the Bundaberg region and also the Meriam Mer people of the Eastern Torres Strait. An element that was conveyed in Canberra today is the return of the remains of elders and artefacts that are held by the United Kingdom. Throughout last year's Indigenous voice referendum, the monarchy offered no comment in relation to the proposal, Indigenous self-determination, or, as a whole. I'd like to understand your party's, to the panel, I'd like to understand your party's position on the return of Indigenous remains and cultural artefacts.
Thank you, Daniel, for your question. And you're referring, of course, to Senator Lydia Thorp's protest. Right. Of course, there was the official reception for the King today and the Queen Camilla. Let's just play some of that, just for the people who may have missed it today. Here it is. Thanks, Daniel. I want to start with you, Murray Watt. We're going to get to the substance of your question, Daniel, and come back to you. But Murray Watt, obviously this was a really big moment today that distracted from the official ceremony. But to the substance of what Daniel raises, people are saying there was no other way to raise these issues. How do you see it?
Well, I don't think that would be the only way to raise an issue, whether it be with the monarchy or any member of government. And even though I was actually in the room when that happened, I wasn't aware that was the basis of Lydia Thorp's complaint. So I don't know if it was a particularly effective way of her getting her point across. To the broader issue, I think that I'm not sure that our party has a position on the matter itself, but certainly we've been supportive of a range of First Nations groups being able to regain ancestors' remains. I think any right-thinking person would acknowledge that that's the right thing to be done. In fact, my son, who's in the audience tonight, and I'm going to embarrass, did a school assignment about this only this year or last year, and I learned a lot more about the issue myself, and I think it's one that a lot of Australians don't understand the full subject matter, but I think that it is the right thing for museums and other institutions overseas to return those remains, and I think, as far as I'm aware, our government has assisted with that, and I'm certainly happy to take it up within government.
Daniel, Senator Lydia Thorp obviously she's all across the world's headlines, including overseas. Did you think it was an appropriate way of raising this?
I would, reserve comments in relation to the actions. I would like to focus on the message. I do believe it is an important issue still affecting Indigenous Australians. We're talking about, 200 years of pain that is continuing to be unanswered and unresolved. And the monarchy, the government of the United Kingdom and the Australian government, I think we're all a part of this Commonwealth. We are in a position to affect this change and bring about some real reconciliation for Australians, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous.
Okay, Senator... Thanks, Daniel. Senator Susan McDonald, to the substance of Daniel's question.
Well, I congratulate you on coming tonight and standing up and in a measured and articulate manner raising the issue. I was really disappointed today because we had the opportunity to have a forum to showcase Australia's Parliament. We had a lot of people who've really contributed to Australia in a whole lot of ways, and they were there and should have had the opportunity to talk about their issues and their place. But instead we had grandstanding, and that wasn't a productive way to prosecute the issue. And of course, I think we do much more when we work together, and I didn't think that was a very productive way to work at all.
But on the substance of repatriation, do you think it's an important issue?
Well, I'm unfortunately aren't aware of what our party's policy is on this, and I will go away and happy to take forward your specific issue and concern and progress it. So I'm sorry I can't be more specific than that.
Larissa?
Daniel, thanks for your question, and I'd also like to acknowledge that we're on First Nations land here and everywhere in this country because sovereignty was never ceded. Yes, we need to bring home those remains, those bones, those artefacts, and my party will continue to push for that, and hopefully, given the remarks tonight, we might make a bit faster progress than we have. And in relation to Senator Thorp, today, I'm not going to police the actions of a First Nations woman, but I chose not to attend the ceremony today. I think Australia is a mature nation now, and I would like to see us have our own head of state. I think we should be a republic, and I think that's also a chance for us to have that deeper conversation and to acknowledge our First Nations owners of the land and to have treaty and treaties and truth-telling. But we've got an awfully long way to go, haven't we, after the disappointing and really hurtful debate that we saw a year ago. So thank you for raising these issues, Daniel.
What's the chance of a referendum on a republic?
In Queensland, well, I think it's a federal issue, of course. We're Queensland, Patricia.
Yeah, but you're a big part of the country.
Whether it's going to happen, I think it's an issue that's fallen away, really, over the last couple of years. And unfortunately, I think we lost the opportunity to have a sensible debate about that in the past. And I don't think it's going to come around for a while yet. There's a lot more important issues out there. Cost of living is one, clearly housing is another one. Just touch on what Daniel said then. Look, I personally support the return of those remains, Daniel. But today I thought I saw from Lydia Thorp, she is the queen of irrelevancy. Every time she gets coverage is only because she's yelling at someone. I think she should have done exactly what Larissa Waters did. If she didn't support the monarchy, didn't want to be there, don't turn up. But I don't know if it helps the cause, just every time I see Larissa Waters, she's just yelling at someone. And that's the only time I ever see...
Lydia.
Sorry, Larissa, my apologies. Lydia Thorp, the only time I see Lydia Thorp is she's yelling at someone. And that's all I ever see of her.
Daniel?
I suppose after the recent history, or the last year at least, what do Indigenous people have left? Or how can we find this audience with the monarch in particular to affect that change? If we want to take this approach that, not attending the meetings or not attending these events and whatnot, then it doesn't get talked about at all. I wouldn't be asking these questions or bringing this to the...
Susan, it's an interesting point Daniel makes to its substance, because we are talking about this all day, and it really wasn't on the agenda.
So I would say that there were other strong, vocal, Indigenous, particularly women. I think of Senator Nampijinka Price and Senator Karen Little, who I both work with, as well as others, I'm sure, who were there. And they move forward and work for Indigenous issues, communities, particularly where I'm from, in remote parts of Australia. And they are very strong, capable people who are working for great change. And I think that's a real pity that their voices weren't heard in a more productive way.
Senator Watt, I've heard some people say that there should be some sort of sanction or consequence for Lydia Thorp. Do you agree?
Look, I don't exactly know what the rules of Parliament are, but unfortunately...
You're a senator?
Yeah, but unfortunately, what we saw from Lydia Thorp today is what we see pretty much every week in the Senate. Between her and Pauline Hanson, two senators, one of which is from Queensland, pretty much not a week goes by without the two of them at each other's throats, disrupting the Senate, trying to, and to use Susan's word, grandstand, and for what? I mean, I think that
the point Daniel made.
Well, as I say, I was in the room there when that happened. I was not aware until this very moment that this is the issue that Lydia was raising today. I don't think it worked. I don't think it got the message through to anyone in the room.
We're talking about it now, Dick.
Okay.
Well, thank you for that feedback.
We're not going to be doing that.
But if the idea was to raise the issue with the people who were in the room, I think it failed miserably.
Okay, we're going to move to our next question now, and it comes from Raylene Ellis. Hi, Raylene.
Hi, I'm Raylene from the Sunshine Coast, a mother of a 10-year-old, and I'm worried about the future that we're leaving for our children in terms of climate change. And so my question's pertaining to that. The federal LNP and Dutton want to build 2 nuclear reactors in Queensland, one earmarked for the southeast. Christofelli, the state LNP leader, has said it's not in a part of their policy. Which LNP leader should we believe? And is a vote for the LNP in this state election a vote for nuclear in our backyard?
Susan, you are a federal LNP senator. There is a different position, isn't there? So what will happen in Queensland?
Well, can we just start by understanding that the reason why we are having this conversation is because we're having an energy crisis. We have seen a rushed renewables policy. We have seen skyrocketing electricity prices, which are making it incredibly difficult for people to live in their homes, for businesses. Australian jobs are being offshored. And so that is kind of the urgent situation that we're dealing with. David Christofelli has, I think quite rightly, identified that the immediate problem is getting more supply into the system. He's about restoring the $500 million that was cut from maintenance to Callide, the coal-fired power stations that is a primary source of electricity in Queensland, and getting that back online.
But there is a different
urgent
position from Peter Dutton and Christofelli, right?
So what I'm trying to explain is that is the urgency is right now. More supply, lower prices, it's affecting everything. Food prices through to your home, through to business. But the longer term is how do we have a low emissions, reliable source of electricity that is on day and night, regardless of what's happening. We're taking a policy forward that has got a mix of everything. We are blessed in this country.
But is a nuclear policy in the future, and the state opposition that looks likely to become the government doesn't want it. So what will happen?
Well, in the immediacy, there will be a greater reliance on the existing coal-fired power stations that we have.
There you have it.
And I'm okay with that, because if people can't afford to turn their lights on, if businesses are going offshore and you don't have a job, I think we should care about that. And we do. The longer term is a nuclear solution, like so many other countries in the world. In fact, I think we are one of the few industrial, established economies that doesn't have nuclear power. And we're saying we should have it the way every other major economy does.
So will you try and convince the Queensland state government if they win?
Well, I guess we need to change the EPBC Act federally. That is the biggest hurdle. So until we're elected, Australia is doomed not to have that option.
Scott, how is this playing out in Queensland? Because the state party is saying something different.
Well, friends can disagree, PK, that can happen. And
big is the disagreement, Scott?
But David Christofelli has made it very clear. It won't be happening in Queensland. There is legislation in place banning nuclear power in Queensland, and that's not going to change. He's made it very clear that's not going to happen. And now I expect if David is fortunate enough after Saturday to be the Premier, a Queensland Premier stands up for Queensland. It doesn't really matter who's in Canberra, Labor, LNP. You stand up for what you believe in terms of what's best for Queensland. But David has made it very clear it won't be happening in Queensland. Legislation is in place banning it. It's not going to change.
Why?
Well, he doesn't believe that's necessary in Queensland. He's building a policy of a mix of traditional fuels, renewables. He thinks that is the best way to determine reliable, affordable power. And I take on board what Susan said. That is what the whole issue is about at the moment. Across Australia, people worry about the reliability of power. And I think it's actually noticeable in this campaign. Labor has actually been very quiet on this issue at a state level, because I know they've done their own surveys out there.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I'm going to bring in Glenn Butcher, who is the Minister for Regional Development and the MP for Gladstone. I understand you're with us, Glenn. Welcome. Look, that point that was just made, I hope you just heard it, that Labor hasn't been playing up this nuclear issue. How is it playing out on the ground there where you are?
Well, nuclear is not on the books here for Queensland. We've made that very clear. And for the gentleman there to say that is certainly not true. We've been talking about our $62 billion energy and jobs plan for years now. It's certainly one of our really big issues that we face here in Queensland is energy. And only Labor here in Queensland is addressing it. You've got a federal government, when the LNP were in government for over 10 years, I think it was over 32 different policy positions on energy. And now this fanciful idea of having nuclear, which is going to be so expensive for Queenslanders and put the rise of the prices up. And I hear the Senator saying that it'll bring them down. There's no way in the world that these big, expensive nuclear reactors in Queensland will ever be built. They'll never be built in time, and they'll cost a lot of money.
Glenn, we're hearing that there's a big swing against your government and you're up against it where you are in Gladstone. Is that what you're sensing? Is there a sense of, baseball bats for the government?
This is a big industrial town and a good union town. I'm very confident in Gladstone here that we'll be successful. It's a very, very good town, and a lot of people here know what they want. They want a government that's actually got a plan. They want a government that's got good ideas. And they want a government that's actually honest to the people of Queensland and to the people of Gladstone and Central Queensland region of what you're going to do and how you're going to pay for it. We are seeing the exact opposite on the ground here in Gladstone in relation to what the LNP are suggesting. People have asked me on the booth every morning. We're doing 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day, and they want to know who David Crisafulli is and where is he. Okay. Why won't he tell us about it?
So you think you're doing okay, but do you expect at a kind of whole state level that Labor is set to lose power?
Well, it's certainly going to be challenging, but I'm a rugby league player, and I was at the Brisbane Grand Final and they were way in front, and Penrith come back to win. We're not out of this race. We are doing everything possible. We've got all of our people on the ground. Central Queensland, Regional Queensland, North Queensland. They're working their butts off in the electorates, and we've seen the latest poll out today saying that the swing is coming back to Labor in Queensland. So we'll keep working right up until 6 p.m. on Saturday night, and I think a lot of people are going to be surprised at the result on Saturday night.
Well, we'll be watching closely. Thanks, Glenn. Now, we asked the Premier and the Opposition Leader to join us tonight, along with Robbie Katter from Katter's Australia Party. They all declined. But we thought that it would be interesting to just check in with some of the state players as well tonight. Murray Watt, obviously we've heard loud and clear that the LNP locally in Queensland are not interested in nuclear. That means that there is quite a different position, isn't there, federally and at a local level? Do you expect that would be honoured in Queensland?
If anyone believes that David Crisafulli is going to stand up to Peter Dutton, I've got a Brisbane powerhouse to sell you. It is not going to happen.
Hang on a minute. If he wins in a landslide, why won't he be able to?
Well, a couple of things. Peter Dutton, in his one visit to Queensland through the campaign, nuclear was raised, and what he said was the first thing we've got to do is get David Crisafulli elected as Premier. He sees that as the first stage of delivering his nuclear plan. If Scott is right and David Crisafulli is going to stand in the way of Peter Dutton's plan, then Peter Dutton has no energy policy. The only thing he is putting forward to deal with our energy needs into the future is nuclear, which is too expensive, too slow and too risky. It's a terrible plan to begin with, but he has no plan if David Crisafulli stands up to him. We all know that Peter Dutton will just barrel through, and like he does on every other issue, and force this upon Queensland and every other state. So if people want to stop nuclear happening in Queensland, the way to do that is by maintaining a Labor government which is on the record not only opposing nuclear but investing in renewables all over the state.
Okay. Larissa?
Thanks, Vicky, and thanks, Raylene, for your question. It's pretty clear, and indeed Susan referred to it in her response, that actually this is just a dangerous distraction. We know that nuclear would be decades away. It's no solution to the climate crisis, which needs solutions now. We know we could have 100% clean renewable energy, hopefully publicly owned, that would bring people's power bills down and, of course, keep the lights on. We know that's actually what we should be doing. And so the fact that Peter Dutton is so desperate to be clamouring about nuclear all the time actually just says to me that this is a smokescreen to continue their support for coal and gas. Now, unfortunately, that's a bipartisan position because we've seen, most disappointingly, we've seen more than 25 coal mines approved federally under the Labor administration, and at the state level, it's 38 that have been approved. So unfortunately, for all of the bickering about nuclear, actually they're on a unity ticket when it comes to new coal and gas.
True.
And we are shamelessly promoting publicly owned renewable energy as the way to generate jobs.
Can I just say, it is good to promote these things. Stephen Miles' government is delivering those things. State Labor is on track to deliver 80% of Queensland's power needs by renewable power by 2032. They have a state-owned clean energy company. It's happened. It's not about promoting these things or campaigning for them. It's actually
just stop opening coal and gas. Just no new
Let's
coal
hear
and
now.
gas.
We've got a question from Idol Falkillen. Hi, Idol.
Hello, good evening, thank you. As someone who drives to the office 3 times a week, I'm spending $12.46 per round trip on tolls, including the video matching fee, just to use the Gateway Motorway Bridge. That amounts to about $157 per month, which is a significant burden on my budget. With Transurban controlling so many toll roads and prices going up, what concrete steps are being taken to ease the pressure on everyday commuters like me?
Idol, that's a really pertinent question. Our viewers would have seen Four Corners tonight, which really put a spotlight on, if I can be blunt, the fleecing that commuters are facing on the back of these companies. Scott, I'm going to start with you at at a state level. It's pretty alarming, some of the figures of how much people are paying just to get to work.
Oh, look, it's hard, and I appreciate that, especially this time when there's cost of living pressures everywhere at the moment. Look, some of these, and I haven't seen the Four Corners program yet, but I heard some of the coverage during the day. Look, clearly, I think some of these contracts in future need to be reviewed. Some of the automatic increases I think the program has talked about, that's something that governments have to look at. I do make the point that some of the roads are being talked about, some of the tunnels, they were paid for by the private sector, and that's how that's being funded. But having automatic increases going forward, that needs to be part of negotiations going forward from governments at a state, at a federal level, across Australia.
But Murray, are state governments just getting terrible deals? Why are these prices being charged to people just trying to go to work?
Thanks, Idol, for the question. And as someone who from time to time does have to travel on Brisbane's toll roads, they do add up to people. I did hear this morning in the promotion for the Four Corners show the New South Wales Roads Minister John Graham talking about the policy his government had brought in to cap tolls. I think it's $60 a week from memory it was. It may well be that the state government here decides to do something. Of course, one of the major things that Stephen Miles' government has done to relieve commuter costs is the 50-cent public transport fares, which have been a raging success. Stephen talks about having grown up in Petrie and the outer northern suburbs of Brisbane and the public transport fares he and his family incurred. I know people who are saving $150 a week as a result of those changes. But that's not to say that more can't be done here as well. You will have seen in the last week at a federal level, we've announced a range of things around debit card surcharges, some of the action against supermarkets, other dynamic pricing sort of changes to try to crack down on corporate fleecing of people. And this is probably something that people should have a look at as well.
Corporate fleecing. Idol, you are putting your hand up again.
Yep, 50 cents fare, that is very great. But for commuters like me, it's not applicable to me because I always drive.
Yep.
And it took around 1.5 hours if I will take bus because I need to interchange from Brighton to different bus station to Morari. So it will not help me and it's not helping me. So I'm still depending on the toll gates.
Susan?
Well, I think it is typical that Labor would talk about public transport fees when so much of the state, the people don't have the opportunity to go on public transport at all, much less have multiple changes. So for so much of the state who is worried about whether or not their car's been stolen, they can't get their kids to school, they can't go to work, and instead they're being told, don't worry, you can have a 50-cent bus fare, is absolutely ridiculous. Also remember that this is a government that has not spent $6 billion on road spending that they budgeted. That's not me saying that, that's the Queensland Auditor General saying that. This is a government that's not been spending on necessary infrastructure in the right places so that there is less congestion, less requirement for you to only have one option of how to get to work, so that you can't choose.
Do you think they should be
not to.
capping tolls here?
Oh, I think that this is a much bigger problem than, once again, the government stepping in and paying for everything. This is a government that is now going to have $7 billion a year in interest repayments.
But this is about corporate responsibility as well.
This is exactly what I'm saying, though. This is a government that has got so much debt in Queensland that we will spend $7 billion a year on interest payments, not on anything that's greater services for Queenslanders, not on better health care, not on better police or anything like that. This is wasted money on a government that's been frivolous with our money, and they're not spending it on things that solve your
sounds
problem.
like an LNP who wants to cut things to me. That's what happened last time.
No, this is a government... This is an LNP that wants to spend your money wisely. We in Queensland always had a policy that we wouldn't borrow money for recurring expenditure. It would be for things that provided growth for the state. That was the same. It was bipartisan right up until Anna Bligh. And under Anna Bligh, debt took off.
Okay.
And, well, this is the price we're paying.
All right, let's go to our next question, though. Tim Arnott has a question. Hi, Tim.
Hi, my partner and I are both teachers, performing a critical role in educating the next generation, and yet we can't afford a home for our family in Brisbane. At the same time, the Prime Minister has just purchased a multi-million-dollar mansion in New South Wales, and of the 227 federal sitting MPs and senators, only 12 declared no home ownership. Now, in my opinion, I think we really need to see our unions stand up and strike for higher wages. With a state and federal election around the corner, what will the political parties do to improve the wages of workers, particularly in the public sector?
Well, Murray, what you happen to also be the Employment Minister.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks to you, and I think you said your partner as well, are both teachers. Almost my entire family, going back a couple of generations, are teachers, and I very much recognise the really valuable work that you perform. Can I answer this question in a couple of ways around wages and around housing? Obviously, from a wages perspective, those sorts of decisions are made by state governments, but you will have seen that our government at a federal level, we were elected on a platform of getting wages moving again. And as a result of the changes that we've made to workplace laws, we are seeing wages now above inflation for consecutive quarters, for the last three or four consecutive quarters. Now, I'm not saying that's happening in every single workplace or every single employee, but our wages are moving above inflation again, which is crucial for cost of living. And, you know, we'll probably have another one of these in the run-up to the federal election, but Peter Dutton and the Coalition have already said on the record that they will be cutting a range of workplace rights and conditions if they win government. So I think that'll be a big issue come election time. But on housing, of course, that's the other side of the picture, is we need more housing supply. And it won't surprise you to hear me say that we would dearly love for the Coalition and the Greens to stop voting together in the Senate and blocking some of the things that we're trying to do. The Help to Buy scheme is the latest one. But our Housing Australia Future Fund, which is all about building social and affordable homes for essential workers like yourself, that was held up in the Senate for months by the Coalition and the Greens refusing to support it. We need to get past the protesting, the campaigning, the blocking local developments in local areas, and Greens MPs who have on their website campaign kits about how to block a housing development. We need more homes.
Luxury apartments in
floodplains
is not going to solve the housing crisis.
They are not all.
Luxury apartments.
I want to hear from Larissa,
Please.
because Murray Watt's just accused you, it's not the first time I've heard this talking point, but that the Coalition and the Greens are teaming up. Are you guys in cahoots?
Thanks for the opportunity to respond to that. Firstly, as I said, luxury apartments in floodplains do not help
That's not
anybody
every
actually
development.
have an affordable home. And Tim, thank you so much for teaching the next round of leaders and all of our wonderful young kids. Teachers definitely deserve to be paid more, so do nurses, so do other frontline workers. And I might add most of those are female dominated. And it's no surprise then that women are the fastest growing cohort of homelessness once we hit over the age of 55 because of that undervaluation of the work that we disproportionately do. And as someone who is working to serve your local community, you should be able to afford to live in the place where you work and teach. And that's exactly why we have proposed a public developer to actually build homes at cost for rent or sale so that people can afford to live in those communities that they're working in. And if you rely on private developers who are literally doing it to make profit, then of course they don't want to see the housing crisis fixed because they're laughing all the way to the bank. The current situation suits them very nicely, which is precisely why we have said to the government, please actually come and talk to us about reducing those tax perks, that negative gearing and those capital gains tax that make housing unaffordable for ordinary people, that make it easier for someone to buy their 7th or 8th investment property rather than a first homeowner, a renter who's desperately trying to save for a mortgage to get a home. And so we've said, please come and talk to us. And we've set a date for when we will next vote on these bills, and we are desperately trying to
And if you
come
don't
to
get
an
what you
agreement.
want, will you vote against the bills again?
We really want to see the Labor government budge. It's not a negotiation to say it's our way or the highway. We want to see some moves to freeze rents, to bring down the cost of homes, to make sure those tax perks can be reduced. At the moment, we're getting absolutely no engagement from the Prime Minister, and that needs to change.
Tim,
People deserve that.
I see that you want to get back in.
Yeah, well, just in the last year in Brisbane, house prices have gone up 15%. My rent went up 8% and my wages went up 3%. So make that work for me.
Yeah, we're trying.
Scott.
Well, look, there's a lot of people struggling out there, Tim, and I feel for you there. The LNP has announced that if they're elected, they'll scrap stamp duty for first home buyers buying new homes, opening up more land. That's what it's all about, trying to get more properties on the market there to drive down the costs to help you. It's just part of across the board cost of living pressures you're facing.
But how about the
housing, I
wages
understand,
growth
is very
question?
important for that.
The wages growth part of the question.
Oh, look, we've got to look at the wages. Wages keeps going up, but the reason you need the wage increases is in terms of you want your wages going up because of cost of living pressures out there. You've got to deal with the cost of living pressures out there. And that's what, unfortunately, under this Labor government, at a state level, Labor government at a federal level, the cost of living is going through the roof. You've got to deal with those issues. I can understand why you want more money because basically everything else is going up at the time. You've got to deal with those pressures.
Except our wages.
Well, I can understand why you need to have higher wages because of that cost of living pressures across the board under both the state Labor government and the Albanese government. And to see, it's extraordinary during this election campaign. I think one of the moments of this election campaign when Anthony Albanese comes up to Queensland to announce with the state government a housing policy, the same day it's revealed that he's Mr. Clifftop mansion owner there, is extraordinary. I don't know why he blindsided his own Labor colleagues up here. It was just an embarrassment for Labor.
Does he have a right
see
to buy a house?
I don't have a problem with him owning it at all, but I can tell you, as you know, PK, talk to his colleagues, and I know Murray was defending it over the weekend about this, but his colleagues can't believe the tin ear the Prime Minister's got over this, and especially coming up on the day the state Labor government was announcing a housing policy,
So it's
and to
about
have
timing.
that story
Susan,
come out.
Don't politicians have a right to have nice houses?
We encourage people to do the very best they can in their home, in their car, in their lifestyle. But what I think is a problem is when somebody pretends to be something different to what he presents himself to be. So multi-million-dollar property that is not in your electorate, that is not about you saying, I'm here to represent my people. I think that's the bit that's really got the rub for people.
Okay.
But it was the state Labor government that introduced the renters tax that meant that people sold investment properties. There were less properties available for rentals. That's what pushed up the prices, particularly in regional cities like where I'm from. That was devastating. About 30% of the houses left the market, which made it harder for people to rent. Not everybody can afford to buy. So that was an important problem. And the next part is, how do you encourage councils to be able to build the necessary headworks, to put in the sewerage and the roads, all of those things. Now, here in Brisbane, you have a bigger population, but in places around the state that don't have those populations, don't have that number of ratepayers, they'll be reliant on the policies that have been announced by David Crisafulli and his team, and federally by Peter Dutton, to assist councils to pay for those things.
All right. Now, you're watching Q&A from the Brisbane powerhouse. On the panel tonight, Susan McDonald, Murray Watt, Larissa Waters and Scott Emerson. Our next question comes from Peter McRae. Hello, Peter.
Hello. I'm the Mayor of Mount Isa. My question today is about some of the challenges we're facing, from youth crime to domestic violence to our large Glencore underground copper mine closing, costing us 1,200 jobs. When it comes to election time, marginal seats such as Townsville seem to get a lot of attention, but we go relatively overlooked. So I'm wondering, if your party wins government, what can you do to help communities like Mount Isa and ones similar to ours to remain great places to live, work and invest for now and into the future?
Scott.
Oh, look, and great to see you, Peter, and I know Mount Isa very well. Look, obviously we backed the Copper String project, very important for your area. But Mount Isa's got a great history, as you know, and it's got a great future. I think the important thing, and I know talking to Susan about this, critical minerals is the real issue for you up there. If we can help out in terms of those areas, in terms of getting that, particularly Mount Isa, I think is a top spot for that. That's where it helps that area. But I understand the challenges for a city like Mount Isa that's seen it changing, but backing projects like Copper String, but also supporting the development of critical minerals in your area is the way to help Mount Isa. But this is the important thing. The LNP is a party for the whole of Queensland, regional particularly. We understand the challenges of the distances, how far you're away, whether it's in Western Queensland, North Queensland. It is hard, but we need to support projects like that in terms of Copper String, but also critical minerals.
So, Peter, you are, as you say, the Mayor of Mount Isa. That's kind of, it's Katter country, isn't it? Is that a fair way to describe the political landscape there?
Yeah, we do have our local members are Katter, both at a state and federal level.
Right. And what would you like to see the major parties promising?
I'd like to see the economic support that we require to transition. If potentially a quarter of our population moves away, we're not going to be able to bridge that transition and create the wealth for the state that we've had in the past. So we've identified several projects that we need a combination of funding from state, federal and industry, and we're going around and meeting with people now to try and make that happen.
Okay. Murray Watt, is that the kind of thing that the federal government wants to partner with Mount Isa?
Yeah, and I know some of my colleagues have been in discussion with you about that, Mayor, because we absolutely recognise as Queenslanders the enormous wealth that Mount Isa and many of our other mining communities have delivered to the state over decades. It was tragic to see Glencore make its decision to shut down that operation, and that will have a really dramatic impact on your town. And this is an area where I would be in agreement with Scott. You know, I think the longer term future of those sorts of communities like Mount Isa is going to rest on some of those newer minerals that are going to be needed to assist with decarbonisation, whether it be about electric vehicle batteries or all the other sorts of uses for those minerals. I know that the state government has already delivered significantly for the Copper String project that Scott talked about, and for those who don't know, massive electrification from Townsville right across to Mount Isa, powered by renewables in many cases. Not sure how Susan feels about that, but powered by renewables.
I'll get a go next.
But the point being, we can create mineral processing in that whole corridor rather than just being a country that digs things up and sends them overseas. We, as a Labor Party, we want to do more value adding, create those manufacturing jobs through cheaper energy as well.
Do you think that's a good idea, Susan?
Well, What I would say is that we talk about Mount Isa and that region being a long way from Brisbane. I would say that Brisbane is just a long way away from Mount Isa. And as a proud North Queenslander, I think this is a really important discussion about how important Northern Australia is to Australia. And we have failed over generations to invest in the North in the way that we need to, for three very big reasons. The first is that this is an agricultural food bowl, and we live in a hungry world, particularly our near neighbours who are becoming increasingly affluent, and they want the food grown to the standard that we can in the North. The second is the critical minerals and other resources that we have in Northern Australia. Mount Isa is a perfect place to be doing that, whether it's the resources that are located nearby, processing, the expertise of the people. We are second to none about mining. And of course the third is defence. We have the US and Australia investing billions of dollars into our northern defence facilities, and Mount Isa is a key connection for those things. So for so many reasons we need to be investing in that town and that region. The LNP is absolutely committed to that. But what your real question was is whether or not you're missing out because you're a safe seat that never votes, will never sit in the government. And as somebody who has lived in the North and suffered under that for my entire life, this is something I feel passionately about, because being part of a government and delivering a plan and a solution is hard work. It's not about grandstanding. It is about getting in and doing the planning and the hard work. And that's where we fail under the Katters in the North.
Our next question comes from Joanna Main. Hi, Joanna.
Hi, how are you going? My question's for Susan McDonald. Your party leader has said that there will be no changes to the abortion laws were the LNP to win. My question is, how can the party guarantee this, particularly given how the majority of LNP members voted on the last bill? And secondly, given your absence in the last bill, when the last time the bill was tabled, how will you personally vote if the abortion repeal bill does land back in Parliament?
Okay. Well, you're a federal politician.
So I think this is...
So Susan's in the federal parliament, doesn't get a vote at the local level. But Susan, the question more broadly about whether abortion would be criminalised again is a live issue in Queensland. It's come up a lot. Will there be no conscience vote?
So, Joanna, thanks for your question. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to talk to this because as I go around Queensland, people talk to me about their worries about crime, about their worries about being able to see a doctor or a nurse, the lack of maternity services, the lack of VAD. These are all things that are very live for people, and people aren't saying that they're changing their vote because of abortion laws. That is what I'm hearing.
So that's the people, but what will happen?
Well, and the reason why I was absent from the vote is I don't vote in the Queensland Parliament. I don't sit there, so if you're looking for my name, that's why you won't see it. David Crisafulli has been incredibly clear. There won't be a change to the legislation. And I think this is a distraction from Labor and the Katters. It's a sweetheart deal because they've panicked. They've panicked when they see people are changing their votes because of the things that are mattering to them on a day-to-day basis. Crime, health, cost of living. They're the things that matter. And so at 2 minutes to midnight, we suddenly have this scare campaign. David Crisafulli gets up and says there'll be no change, and yet that's not enough.
But if a conscience vote did come up...
But he said there'll be no change.
But if the Katter Party raised a private member's bill, everyone would get a conscience vote, right?
But David Crisafulli has said there will be no change.
So does that mean he's going to...
Answering the question, though. He's not answering the question. If he's not going to say there won't be a conscience vote, then there may well be a change.
We will keep going around in circles. David has said that this will not be a change because people on the street are saying to him, we need you to change government because of these reasons. We are frightened in our homes. We are leaving the keys in our car so that people are not breaking in and terrorising our children. We are terrified that we won't be able to get an ambulance, much less get into a hospital. We can't have a baby in a regional place. That's what he's focused on. He's been really disciplined on that, and it doesn't really matter what I say tonight because I don't think I will satisfy you, because this is driven
Because he hasn't
by
answered the
Labor
question.
and the Catters, and you know, we will continue going over it.
Joanna?
I think the problem is you haven't actually answered the question. We're not talking about crime. We're not talking about the hospitals, which, although that can obviously become a problem if abortion does go back to where it was prior. I'm actually asking, how can he stop your party from actually voting for how they would like to vote at the end of the day, if Katter raises the bill? And you've simply avoided the question. I just want to know how. How can he actually guarantee Queenslanders that it won't happen?
I don't
will
know
he?
what else to tell you apart than that is what he said, that there won't be a change to the legislation.
Well,
It's just
Yeah,
not
1
good
minute.
enough.
Yeah,
If
please.
you don't mind me jumping in just quickly, Joanna, thank you for raising this, because it was 2018, not that long ago, that abortion was taken off our criminal law books. It used to be a crime for us to decide what we wanted to do with our bodies. Now, thank goodness that law was changed, but now we have the spectre of the Katter Party, who could be in the balance of power after this election and who could demand and introduce a private members bill, and we have the possible next Premier refusing to say that he will bind his party members to oppose the
He
change.
hasn't
He's
said
saying
he'll
there's
bind
no
them, but
plan.
he's clearly said that he doesn't want to do this, though.
Well, he's saying it's not his plan. Let's hope it's not. But if somebody else puts it on the table, it's not clear how his party will vote. Every other time it's been a conscience vote. So I think there are genuine concerns that our rights might go backwards, which scares me, because the debate that we should be having is about making people's choices, making abortion free and accessible, not whether or not it should be a crime to make decisions for ourselves.
Thanks, Joanna, for the question. And I actually do think this is a really big issue heading into the Queensland election. Of course, there are a range of other issues, health services, all sorts of other things. But clearly, this is an issue that has really resonated, in particular with women, but more broadly across the community as well. And I think that the way that David Crisafulli has handled this issue is one of the reasons why the gap in this election is closing. He's come across as shifty, evasive, dodgy, not wanting to answer the question. And the issue is, I mean, I'm prepared to take him at face value that he might not introduce legislation to recriminalise.
He's quite clear he doesn't want to do that.
I'm prepared to, but the issue is what happens if the Katters go ahead with their proposal to introduce the bill, and then he has not admitted or said whether there will be a conscience vote for his MPs. And this is why having a change of government in Queensland is such a risk, because if there is a change of government and you have a majority of LNP members who have a conscience vote, then it is very likely we will see abortion go back to being a crime again. It took a Labor government in Queensland after many decades of campaigning to make abortion not a crime, and if we have a change of government, we've got LNP candidates out there telling people on the booths, it's been reported, that they're telling people, trust me,
David
it's
Crisafulli
okay,
has
we'll
said,
sort it out afterwards.
David Crisafulli has said it will not be changing. Now, if he wins on Saturday, and there's no certainty he's going to win, that will only be the second time in 13 elections the LNP has won an election. He's got the authority, and he says it will not be changing. Not about if someone else introduces the bill, we'll think about it. He has said very clearly it will not change. And he will come in as a Premier with the authority, having won only the second time in 13 elections for his party. He said it will not change, bottom line.
Well,
Okay.
he needs to be clearer about what that actually means. With the Greens, every single MP, every single time, we will always support a woman's right.
We've got
to
a
choose.
question now from Tioni Young.
Hi everyone, I'm Tierney, I'm 25. I help run a social enterprise and we work with disengaged, disadvantaged young people, teaching them life skills. Now a lot of them are involved in the youth justice system, in and out of detention at some point. I've seen a lot of people talk about youth crime and say maybe it isn't as big as an issue as it's portrayed to be. Last Wednesday on my morning walk, I walked on a street and 6 small businesses had their front doors smashed in and things stolen from it, with a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old being the intruders. The LNP has committed to being tough on crime, and I think for the really extreme cases, I might agree with that, but also with some new early intervention programs, which I think are much needed. But I'm interested in hearing your perspective, if you think it's a problem, and what can we actually do to support young people before it gets to that stage.
Thanks, Tioni. Tioni's making it quite clear that in her experience there is an issue with youth crime. Are the solutions treating children like adults?
Well, let's be very clear here. Labor claimed that the law and order crisis in Queensland was just a media beat-up. That's what Labor says. And your own experience there, what you see in your own community. Look, to be honest, I don't know many people in Queensland who haven't personally or know a family or friend or a community who hasn't been affected by crime. And Queensland has the highest victims of crime numbers in Australia. Higher than New South Wales and Victoria, bigger states. Ours is the highest level. Something needs to change. And this is what the chance is on Saturday. If you want the same things that are happening to keep happening, that's happened for the last 10 years, for another 4 years, you vote for Labor. If you want to change, you vote for the LNP. They've put in policies, and the only change that Labor has done during that time on crime is they've had to be dragged screaming, kicking and screaming to get that changed. Breach of bail, as an example of that, where they said, no, we shouldn't do it, can't be done, we'll never do it. But the public outcry, because of the levels of crime in Queensland, saw them finally adopt the LNP policy. Something needs to change. The LNP's put up a balanced approach. It's been tougher on juvenile crime and across the board, but also, as you say, early intervention. It's got to be both parts of that, and the LNP under David Crisafulli has outlined that.
All right.
Things need to be changed.
I'd like to bring in Natasha Lane now, who's running as an independent in the marginal seat of Thurungara. It's in the regional city of Townsville. If I can bring you in, Natasha, hello.
Hi.
I know that you're campaigning on the ground. Just give me a sense. I mean, we keep hearing about youth crime coming out of Queensland. Is this something you're really observing too on the ground?
Yes, it is a factor in, I think, people making their choices on who to vote for. But then also, if we look at the facts, the number of young people that have been committing crime has reduced over the last year. So it's a bit, and my interactions with people on the ground has been they kind of don't like the harsher stance in adult crime. But they do understand that there is something that needs to be done.
Right, so you get a sense that people do want action on crime. They feel, what sort of experiences are they telling you about? Are people feeling unsafe?
Yes, I know a number of people myself who have felt unsafe, but it's also, we can't be using that as a slogan or jumping on the fear of what people are actually feeling. We need to come with long-term solutions that are actually going to work for the young people and for the community as well.
Now, in an election campaign, of course, that's a bit more of a complicated message, isn't it, Natasha? You're obviously running as an independent, giving it a red-hot go in Townsville. You're a First Nations woman. Do you feel like, Indigenous voices are being heard in this discussion?
I'm going to say no, not in particularly in this discussion. When we look at the numbers, the demographic of young people that actually are in detention, and then the rehabilitation process in the detention centre and once they come back into society, there needs to be a stronger, culturally safe rehabilitation programs for young people to actually see some success in curbing this.
Natasha, why is it, in your observation, so bad in Townsville?
I just think it's just the where we live, the demographic of people up here. There's a lot of other factors that come into play as well. Cost of living, housing, education, health. It's not just one thing is going to fix this. We have to look at the multifaceted approach that needs to happen to actually bring the changes for people to kind of understand the byproduct that's been happening.
Natasha, thanks for joining us from Townsville tonight. It's been a real pleasure to hear your voice. Natasha Lane is running as an independent in the election on Saturday. We wanted to give you a bit of a sense that there's a lot of people running in this election, raising lots of issues. Senator, that was a really nuanced perspective. She says crime is a big issue. There are lots of issues, but it's complex. Sometimes in election campaigns that gets lost.
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right, and I live in Townsville, so I understand it. The Australian Bureau of Statistics says that youth crime rates are up, that it is more young people committing more crimes and they're escalating in their severity. That's what we're seeing. They're moving from property crime to assaults. That is something that people are terrified of. Last year there were 289,000 victims of crime in Queensland, just for 1 year. And David Crisafulli has announced a package of $1 billion for a greater intervention for at-risk and troubled kids who are not fitting in the school system. He's talking about greater programs to engage, to give them opportunities and post-detention, to have where you have a proper amount of time to be able to get these kids back on track and into a future that we'd all want to be proud of. But let's remember that 289,000 people have either have been impacted by crime, whether it is the worst outcome where they have lost a family member, losing a car, waking up with somebody next to their bed. We should not ever forget the victims in this discussion.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely.
And we've tried to centre them through a couple of our questioners who have really raised these issues. But Larissa, what are you worried about?
Thanks, PK, and thanks, Tioni, for the work that you do to help kids get back on track. Absolutely everybody deserves to be safe and feel safe, but locking up children, the statistics show, actually makes reoffending more likely. It doesn't help them, it doesn't rehabilitate them, it condemns them to a life of crime. The statistics are there's a 90% reoffending rate within a year of being released. So it's pretty clear that locking up kids isn't going to work. What we want to do is to try to prevent that crime before it happens. And that means, we think, investing in things like housing so that and fixing poverty so that people have those solid basics, making sure that people are able to go to school, that those schools are fully funded, that they have free lunches and breakfast provided to keep kids at school, and then investing in those early intervention programs that it sounds like you work in one of those already, Tioni. That's the way that we can support young kids to have a bright future, to have some options in their life, and by locking them up. And we saw at the state level that the state government suspended the Human Rights Act to put children in adult watch houses. Now that, it just absolutely breaks my heart that is seen in any universe as acceptable. And this whole adult crime, adult time, these are children, their brains haven't developed properly, and if we want to actually help them get back on track, then locking them up with grown-ups is
But
not
Larissa,
going to work.
isn't the point though that the message is resonating still? Well, there is something going on, right?
I think people are desperate to feel safe, and I disagree with Susan's stats. I'm not sure what ABS stats you're referring to, because the stats I've seen are that actually youth crime is half what it was over a 14-year period. But you're right in one aspect. One crime that is going up is sexual violence. Now, that is something that we desperately need to attend to. We seriously need to fund those rape crisis centres, because there is a waiting list as long as your arm to get help when you suffer from sexual violence. And trigger warning, I should have prefaced that before I said anything. But we also need to fund properly those respectful relationships educations programs in schools to help kids help kids learn about what is a healthy relationship, what are proper boundaries. So I do think we need to do far more on that particular aspect of a really disturbing increase in sexual violence.
Well, final predictions. Who's going to win?
It's going to be tough. We'll need a Kevin Rudd-style number of swing that when he beat Howard for David Crisafulli to be successful on Saturday night.
Okay,
so
well,
if you want more of the same...
You want David Crisafulli to be like Kevin Rudd. That's what I got out of that. Murray, what?
Well, Stephen Miles is like Kevin Rudd, so not about wannabes. Of course,
the ghost of Kevin Rudd continues.
Of course, Stephen won't mind me saying that. Of course, I want to see a Labor government, but apart from my own party affiliations, if Queenslanders want to see continued delivery of progressive reform, public transport, renewable energy, all of those other things, and cost of living, the only way to do it is a majority Labor government.
think it looks like we'll get a really good increase in our Greens numbers, and we're hoping that there will be a minority Labor government with Greens in the balance of power, because that's what we want to be able to tackle the climate crisis, the housing crisis and the cost of living crisis.
If you want more of the same, vote Labor. If you want real change, vote for the LNP.
Oh, goodness. That's a stump speech, not a prediction. Well, that's all we've got time for tonight from the powerhouse in Brisbane. Thanks very much for joining our panel tonight. Susan McDonald, Murray Watt, Larissa Waters and Scott Emerson. Next week, Q&A will be broadcasting from Sydney. The applause. I'm not going to clap for myself. The panel will include Federal Health Minister Mark Butler, British writer Johan Hari, Teal MP Dr Monique Ryan and former New South Wales Nationals Minister and nurse Bronnie Taylor. Thanks so much for being part of the conversation tonight. We really appreciate your company. Good night.
His songs became the soundtrack of our lives.
I'm so excited that you're joining me to Take 5.
Wait for it. Songwriting legend.
There it is.
Neil Finn shares the music that inspired him.
That was my introduction to the music that I love. It gave me an excuse to be obscure for the rest of my life.